A successful yuppie arrives at a remote sanatorium where visitors undergo peculiar water treatments. The film begins with a businessman working late in his office. Suddenly, he is struck by chest pain. He drinks water from the cooler, but a heart attack isn't something water can cure. The businessman collapses, lifeless, in the empty office. Only his Employee of the Year photo on the wall silently witnesses the unfolding tragedy. A train speeds through the picturesque landscapes of the Swiss Alps, carrying the protagonist, a young financier named Lockhart, on a business trip. He chews nicotine gum and is glued to his phone, relentlessly making deals and chasing money. The journey is interrupted by a flashback. Lockhart moves into a new office, appreciated by his superiors. When he is summoned upstairs, he is full of optimism. However, the board of directors presents him with a strange letter from CEO Pembroke, who has retreated to an alpine sanatorium and announced his decision to quit the business. Pembroke's signature is crucial for an upcoming deal. Lockhart is tasked with traveling to the sanatorium to find Pembroke and bring him back to New York. This mission is also a way for Lockhart to atone for financial misconduct. If he fails, prison awaits. Before leaving, he visits his mother at a nursing home. She gives him a handcrafted ballerina figurine as a keepsake and says goodbye, convinced she will never see him again. Lockhart is driven along a winding road past a village at the foot of a mountain, atop which the sanatorium is perched. The driver shares a legend. A baron obsessed with blood purity once lived there. The villagers burned down his estate when he decided to marry his own sister. As they enter the sanatorium grounds, Lockhart notices elderly people in white clothing enjoying themselves outdoors. He asks the driver to wait while he heads to the reception. Visiting hours are over, so Lockhart requests to speak with the administrator. While waiting, he tries to call his office, but discovers there is no reception. He wanders around the lush green lawn and notices a ventilation window leading to the basement of an old chapel. While talking with the administrator, he sees an old photograph on the desk that depicts the sanatorium where the baron's estate once stood. The doctor offers Lockhart a glass of the local miraculous water while taking vitamins from a blue bottle. The administrator suggests returning in the evening when Pembroke's treatments are over. Left with no other option, Lockhart heads back to the car. As Lockhart is leaving, he notices a girl in a blue dress standing on the fortress wall. On the way back, a deer suddenly collides with the car, causing an accident. Lockhart loses consciousness and wakes up in a hospital room at the sanatorium. He is greeted by a cast on his leg and Dr. Heinrich Volmer. The doctor informs him that he has reported the incident to Lockhart's superiors and that he will need to stay in the sanatorium for a few days. The most important thing, Volmer says, is to drink plenty of water to acclimate successfully. After their conversation, Lockhart stands by the window and watches workers sealing a window at the base of the chapel. He drinks a glass of water and notices a small spot on the glass, a tiny insect. He then wanders around the building, observing patients undergoing various water treatments under the supervision of the staff. Soon, he is invited to take a steam bath. In the dense steam of the sauna, Lockhart becomes disoriented and realizes that the exit behind him has vanished. He finds himself in an enclosed room with no apparent way out. Moments later, a corridor appears, and at the end of it, he catches a glimpse of a deer. Following it, he discovers Pembroke, the man he was sent to retrieve. The old man refuses to return to the city for business, speaking instead about the need for purification. He then recalls Lockhart's father, accusing him of betrayal during their early years in business. Suddenly, Pembroke agrees to return to New York for a few days. Lockhart goes to the reception to request a taxi. While waiting outside, he is approached by Mrs. Watkins, an avid fan of mysteries. She is researching the history of the sanatorium and its local legends. Lockhart spots the girl in the blue dress again. Her name is Hannah, and she is described as a special patient. Lockhart mentions that he plans to leave soon, to which Hannah expresses surprise. "Why leave?" she asks. The beautiful scenery makes Lockhart pause and think. However, upon returning inside, he cannot find Pembroke. In the dining hall, where patients dine alongside Dr. Volmer, the doctor explains that Pembroke fell ill after discussions about work and was sent for special treatments. Lockhart grows frustrated and shouts, but suddenly suffers a nosebleed and collapses unconscious. Volmer examines him in his office, suggesting that even at Lockhart's young age, he requires special care. The yuppie reluctantly agrees to the treatment, but once Volmer leaves, he steals Pembroke's medical file. While submitting a urine sample, Lockhart notices something unusual in one of the test tubes, what looks like a parasite. He is later submerged in a sensory deprivation tank, warned that the absence of stimuli might cause hallucinations. Floating in the liquid, he recalls childhood memories, but is soon horrified by the sight of eels surrounding him. He tries to signal the attendant, who is distracted by a nurse. Struggling to surface, Lockhart loses his oxygen tube and suffocates, unable to open the tank's lid. As his pulse fades, he has a vision of his father's death. The man stopped their car on a bridge, stepped out, and jumped over the railing. The attendant revives Lockhart, and when they inspect the tank, there are no eels to be found. Back in his room, Lockhart reviews Pembroke's medical records and notices abnormalities with his jaws. His attention is drawn to a strange noise from the bathroom, where the toilet's flush handle moves on its own. Peeking outside, he sees a worker wheeling a cart with a body toward the chapel. The next morning, he speaks with Mrs. Watkins, who reveals more about the sanatorium's dark past. The Baron wasn't burned for merely cosplaying Jaime Lannister, she explains, but for conducting medical experiments on kidnapped villagers. Their desiccated bodies were often found in the fields. Lockhart suspects the Baron was searching for a cure for his wife's infertility. Later, Hannah is taken for her treatments, and Lockhart explores a locked door in the tower, but is shooed away by a worker. Spotting Hannah again, Lockhart convinces her to give him a ride on her bicycle to the village, offering her the ballerina figurine his mother gave him before her death. Together, they descend the mountain. Lockhart leaves Hannah in a pub and heads to a veterinary clinic across the street to consult about Pembroke. The results are intriguing. Despite the sanatorium's emphasis on drinking water, the vet attributes the patient's tooth loss to dehydration. He also elaborates on the legend. The Baron's sister-wife was infertile. Each attempt at conception ended in a miscarriage, with the fetus showing severe deformities. During their conversation, the veterinarian dissects a deer that had been drinking water from a mountain spring. Its stomach is teeming with live eels. At the pub, Lockhart calls his office and discovers that Dr. Volmer never reported the accident. Hoping to discuss the strange happenings at the sanatorium with Hannah, he finds her already the target of a local punk's unwanted attention. A fight breaks out, only to be interrupted by the sudden arrival of Dr. Volmer, who escorts the escapees back to the sanatorium. In Hannah's room, tensions run high. The girl complains of abdominal pain, but Volmer reassures her that he will cure her. Lockhart lingers in the room, noticing Hannah bathing in a tub filled with live eels. That night, he wakes from a nightmare and sees a worker wheeling an empty gurney out of the basement. At the mirror, he notices a loose tooth and easily pulls it out. Concerned, he heads to the reception to report it, but when the nurse steps away, he sneaks a look at the patient's schedule and discovers Pembroke's current location, the transfusion wing. Lockhart ventures there, avoiding the staff. Near the elevator, he sees a gurney holding a body. Suddenly, the elderly man on the gurney opens his eyes and screams. This distraction allows Lockhart to slip into the elevator and descend further into the sanatorium. He finds several rooms containing hyperbaric chambers. In one, Mrs. Watkins lies on a gurney and speaks to him. She reveals that she had left clues for him. She also explains that the Baroness had been pregnant, but the villagers cut the fetus from her womb and threw it into the lake. Miraculously, the infant survived. Lockhart notices parasites writhing beneath Mrs. Watkins's skin, accidentally knocking over a metal cabinet. The noise alerts the staff, and orderlies rush to investigate. Lockhart hides behind one of the many doors, finding a room filled with water tanks containing submerged individuals, including Pembroke. Furious, Lockhart tries to break the glass, but his efforts are futile. He runs upstairs, but is caught by orderlies and doctors, including Volmer. The medics drag him to a dental office, where they restrain him and drill into his front tooth. Despite the ordeal, Lockhart somehow escapes the chair, sneaks into a car that has just delivered a new patient, and convinces the driver to take him to the police. At the station, Lockhart reports the illegal experiments, but as the officer steps out, he notices a signature blue bottle of the sanatorium's medication in a cabinet. The officer returns with Dr. Volmer, who claims that Lockhart is a delusional and aggressive patient. Pembroke also appears, backing Volmer's story and accusing Lockhart of threatening him. Pembroke's presence leaves Lockhart reeling, doubting his sanity. He reluctantly returns to the sanatorium. The next morning, Lockhart sits at a desk, reviewing Mrs. Watkins' notes. He is distracted by the sound of the toilet's flush handle moving on its own. Removing the tank lid, he sees it filled with eels, but they vanish moments later, seemingly flushed away. Determined, Lockhart dismantles the toilet to investigate, but the eels remain gone. Frustrated, he writes a letter to the board of directors, mirroring the one Pembroke had sent earlier. Later, Lockhart endures a series of treatments. At one point, he shatters a glass of water and uses a shard to cut off his cast, revealing that his leg is perfectly fine. The leg isn't broken, as the doctor claimed. It was all a ruse. Breaking open the lock, Lockhart enters the basement with a shovel in hand. Inside, he discovers an underground lake and an old laboratory filled with jars of preserved eels, handwritten records, deformed human fetuses, and even flayed human skin. There's also an altar with a portrait of the Baroness, who bears a striking resemblance to Hannah, only older. Descending further, Lockhart finds a gurney holding a body. Mrs. Watkins, now deceased, lies beneath the sheet. He hears someone approaching and hides, witnessing a worker tossing the corpse into the lake, where it is devoured by eels. A fight ensues between Lockhart and the worker. Using a brick, Lockhart smashes the man's head and escapes. Terrified and confused, Hannah goes to the dining hall to find Dr. Volmer. Seeing the blood on her dress, Volmer is visibly pleased. Lockhart appears, demanding that Volmer release her. The doctor tries to negotiate, but Lockhart delivers a speech to the patients, revealing how they are being deceived and poisoned with mysterious water. However, the elderly patients rise from their seats not to protest, but to restrain the defiant young man. Lockhart is taken to the transfusion wing and placed in a hyperbaric chamber. Volmer explains that the water from the lake allows the eels to live 10 times longer than normal. For humans, however, it is toxic unless filtered first. The human bodies themselves act as filters, producing the mysterious blue elixir that grants extraordinary longevity to the sanatorium's residents. Later, Volmer tells Hannah that she has become a woman. She visits Lockhart, who sits on a bench outside, and returns the ballerina figurine. She tells him he gave her false hope that she could leave this place. Volmer will never let her go. Lockhart, meanwhile, begins to question why anyone would want to leave. After all, it's so beautiful here. That evening, the sanatorium staff and village residents gather for a wedding ceremony for Volmer and Hannah. Volmer leads the girl to the underground lake, where the laboratory, altar, and a bed await. This is where they are to conceive a child. Hannah resists, but Volmer binds her. In defiance, she strikes him across the face, splitting the skin on his forehead. Clutching the ballerina figurine, Lockhart snaps out of his delirium. Piecing together Mrs. Watkins's clues, he breaks the glass of a framed photograph in the administrator's office. The photo, taken during the sanatorium's construction, shows a man with a bandaged head holding the hand of a young girl in a light dress. Realizing that Volmer is the Baron who discovered the secret to eternal youth and that Hannah is his daughter, Lockhart rushes to the underground lab, pouring gasoline everywhere. The Baron tries to stop him, removing his mask to reveal a grotesquely burned greenish face. Despite this, Lockhart sets the place ablaze. Sparks ignite the ventilation system, spreading the fire to the hall where the staff are celebrating the wedding. A fight ensues, with the Baron nearly feeding Lockhart to the eels. Hannah intervenes, delivering a powerful blow that drives the shovel into her father's disfigured face. Escaping the inferno, Lockhart and Hannah watch the fire engulf the buildings as the oblivious patients continue their dance in the blazing hall. Leaving the burning sanatorium behind, they ride away on a bicycle. At a curve in the road, they collide with a car carrying members of the board of directors. Ignoring their orders, Lockhart gets back on the bike with the 200-year-old girl, smiling maniacally as they ride off into the distance.